We love Zencaster because it allows us to record the audio for our podcast and create the video segments we use for our weekly Sister Scoop episodes. Zencaster has helped us make content capture simple.
It's now super easy to record a podcast with Zencaster. Log in using your browser and start recording a high-quality podcast right away. Record studio quality sound and up to 4K video with your guests, and feel a sense of zen knowing Zencaster's multi-layered backups ensure you always have your recordings in the highest quality, even if the connection is unstable.
If you've thought about podcasting before and realized that you need a lot of different tools and services, those days are over. With Zencaster's all-in-one podcasting platform, you can create your podcast in one place and distribute it to Spotify, Apple, and other major destinations.
Just go to zencastr.com/pricing and use our code SistersAssembled, and you'll get 30% off your first month of any Zencaster paid plan. We want you to have the same easy experiences we do for all of our podcasting and content needs. It's time to share your story.
Katie and I are always hungry, and one snack we both love is beef jerky. That's why we're so excited to tell you about one of our favorite jerky brands, Matt Hat Jerky.
Matt Hat's delicious taste makes it a great snack, and the variety of flavors, including original, black truffle, and my personal favorite, roasted garlic, means there's a flavor for everyone. Plus, it's local to the area where we grew up in, which we just love.
Use the link in the show notes below to get some Matt Hat Jerky for yourself, and make sure to use our coupon code SistersAssembled for 10% off. Hello and welcome to Sisters Assembled, your home for all things MCU. And of course, if you've been following us the last few weeks, you know that we have been deeply analyzing Avengers Endgame, and we have basically missed 3 glaring points as we've gone through the plot. And those 3 points are the big 3: Iron Man, Cap, and Thor. We are going to talk about each of them, their journeys within the film, and how we felt about them and kind of where they ended up. So, because there's definitely a lot to talk about and a lot of feelings around these 3 characters and these representations of them in this film, I'm going to kick it over to Katie, and she's going to get us started with Iron Man.
You guys thought the past 4 episodes were bad, but this is going to be worse.
Lots of soapboxes and lots of opinions.
I've been waiting for us to do this episode for so long. I was going to do it before I was like, we don't even need to watch Endgame for me to, let's just do it because I need to talk about it. Yes, let's begin with Iron Man. I think out of the big 3, in Endgame especially, he's probably the one to me that has obviously they all have different character arcs and different developments throughout the movie, but I do think his is probably the least amount, only because I do think as a character, he's been having such character development his entire time on screen.
Yeah.
And that's not to say Cap and Thor haven't, but they got kind of massacred in Infinity War and Endgame. And so I feel like they're a little bit more meaty versus I do feel like for Iron Man and Tony's just in general arc, it all makes sense. So obviously, I mean, I said from the start of Endgame especially, well, I said it in Infinity War too, Tony in general gets on my nerves, but he really does frustrate me at the beginning of this movie because he gets out of that spaceship blaming everybody, pointing fingers, essentially saying everybody messed up. And I'm like, hey, buddy, we all lost.
Where were you?
Yeah, somebody even said that. So I don't remember who, but somebody straight up was like, Tony, we all lost. We were all fighting too. So I do struggle with his character at the beginning. And then I struggle even further because he's the only one who I'd argue benefits almost from the snap. And don't get me wrong, I'm not saying he's out here on the street yelling, screaming, yippee when everybody starts disappearing. Obviously not. But this man doesn't lose either of his best friends. He doesn't lose his wife. They get married, end up having a kid that they, at the time and in the beginning of Infinity War, didn't seem like Pepper was necessarily really on board with having a child, at least at that time. And so then he's living his little life in this cabin out in the woods. They have all this, whatever. And he's happy. And I think it's hard because then we see how his character struggles with really wanting to help because he is happy versus nobody else is. Nobody else really, quote unquote, won from the snap like he did.
Yeah, it's very interesting because even in Infinity War, Pepper is annoyed with him for continuing to wear Iron Man gear and things like that. And I think that's one of the reasons that she says she's not interested in having a child at that time, because obviously, if your husband's going to be out there risking life and limb like that, I mean, I can understand why you'd be a little nervous. I mean, to then potentially end up as a single mom, like that would be really hard. So I get it. And I think what's interesting then is with everything that happens at the end of Infinity War, it actually pushes Tony into the retirement that he never wanted up until that point.
Yeah.
He is so afraid, or not afraid, he is so ashamed of that failure that he's actually like, you know what? I'm going to hang up the suits, I'm going to hang up the helmet, I'm done. We're over. And that's then what allows him to actually move forward in a personal way with, getting married and having a child and doing all these things and really settling down. And he actually finds a lot of peace there that I think what's interesting is younger Tony never would have found the peace in the small, quiet lifestyle that he and Pepper and Morgan had carved out. So it's definitely interesting then that he's so reticent to go back to that life, because this horribly traumatic event that, to your point, so many people suffered from and he maybe suffered a little less, pushed him into a life that he wasn't at the time maybe ready to embrace, that he ended up really loving and not wanting to step back from.
Yeah. And I think I get it, but I do think from the wider standpoint, it was really frustrating.
Oh yeah.
Like that scene where Ant-Man, I should be calling them from their actual name, Scott. I don't know why I'm like an Ant-Man. He didn't show up as Ant-Man. Scott and Natasha and Steve show up and they say like, "Hey, you're one of the smartest people we know. We think this is possible, but we need you
Mhm.
because we're not going to be able to do it with just us." And when Tony essentially shoots them down initially, it's very frustrating
Yeah.
because you do sit there and, putting aside just my general feelings towards Tony as a character, truly, it's frustrating because you're sitting there as a fan like, dude, half the universe died.
Yeah.
Like they're gone. And if you even have a 1% chance to try to bring them back, I mean, quite frankly, if he really wanted to, he could have sat out the time travel part. He didn't have to go with them.
I never understood that.
Yeah, like you just had to do the science.
Yeah, I never understood why he felt like, if I even make this work from a logistical standpoint, if I, to your point, do the science, do the math, and help people understand how to do it, why he couldn't, like, basically do Hulk's role, which was to bring them, or to, like, let them go through and then come back, because Hulk doesn't. Oh no, he does go.
He does.
Never mind, because his is so, like, it's important, but it's so, like, lackluster in terms of, like, actual action, if that makes sense. So I sometimes forget.
It's a lot of explaining
It is.
his part of the time heist.
And it's,
Yes.
like, very important, but it's definitely, like, a mellow, that's the word I'm looking for, like, a mellower section. So I
Yeah.
had a little bit of a brain fart. But he could have just, to your point, sat it out. He could have been the one doing the controls. Like, there were a lot of options. He basically took it upon himself to say, like, if I do this math, then I have to be there. But it wasn't like he was there coaching people how to, do their portion of the time heist. He couldn't have been in all three places. So why did he feel the need to, be there? I mean, again, like, he didn't actually end up dying during the time heist, so I guess it all could have ended the same way regardless, but,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that's fair. I just was thinking about that because he even says, like, try not to die. And obviously, actually, ironically, those words ring true for Natasha and not him because he does not die at doing the time heist, as you just said.
yeah.
But I do think he has the best arc both in the movie and then obviously as a character, as I said, throughout the entirety of Marvel and I would, or the MCU. And I would hope so because they started in '08 with him. And I would like to think that he would have grown. And there's a lot of times we saw he didn't. Like even at the beginning of this movie, I think that selfishness was very prominent.
Agreed.
Obviously, he ended up changing his mind because specifically because of Peter
Mhm.
and the guilt that he feels for all of that and the responsibility he feels for the fact that Peter is no longer with us. But by the end, I mean, I think him making the sacrifice play, I think everybody always knew that was going to happen. Regardless of how it was going to happen, I think everybody could have told you that was the direction they were eventually going to go with his character. I think he got to live a very happy life in the 5 years when everybody else was suffering in different ways, and so I do think also too from being the starting point, he had to be the ending point. And I think that it told a really great story, and I mean even that whole thing where he says to Pepper earlier on, "I won't be able to rest." And at the end when she's able to say, "You can rest now." You kind of said how he was forced into that retirement, and yes, it was great, but was there always that aspect for him where he needed the suits?
Yeah.
Because regardless, I mean, he blew up his suits at one point, brought them all right back. He needed to. He needed to tinker. That's what he always said. He
Mhm.
had to do that stuff. And I truly don't know if there would have been a different ending for him because I think he had to go out like this because this was what he was meant to do.
Yeah, and you totally make a good point about, that kind of circular moment, that callback when Pepper's able to say to him, "You can rest," after she had told him in the scene on the couch, like, "You're not going to be able to rest." Basically, kind of giving him permission to move on, letting him know, "Hey, Morgan and I are going to be okay." But the other thing that that end scene really calls back to, and of course, this was a lot of the discourse when the film first came out, but I think it's so worth talking about because it is such an important end of an era, truly. In Avengers, there's that scene with Cap and Tony fighting, and Cap says to Tony, "You're not the one to make the sacrifice play." And here we are, all this time later, all these years later, after their fight, and Tony is the one to give his life to really end the threat of Thanos. And so it really pays off on their first meeting together and what's going to be their last. And it's really beautiful. So, yeah, I think there's so much about Tony that does such a good job of really signaling to the viewer, like, hey, you've been along on this journey with us for all these years. And like, yes, the journey's going to continue, obviously, like we've been here now for 6 years covering other stuff, but or talking about other stuff, but at the same time that was a major chapter was closing, and so to begin it and end it with the same character, and then of course ending it with the clanging noises and no end credits and those types of things, like it just did a good job of ending that phase, that era, so that we could start somewhat fresh as we moved into the multiverse saga.
Yeah. And like I said, I just think to what you even just pointed out, even from Avengers, from the very beginning of this, both in Iron Man and Avengers, this character arc has been completed. And then they even managed to complete it within Endgame itself by
Mhm.
kind of almost having him slightly regress at the beginning of the movie to remind us where he's been and then take us to where he needs to end. And so I actually do think, and obviously we're not talking about the entirety of the MCU in phases 1 through 3 when we're talking about these character arcs, but in this case with Tony, they actually do an amazing job of mirroring it in all three parts. Both, or I'm sorry, with first the individual movie, with then his first team up appearance, and then finally in the actual Endgame movie itself. So I think they do a great job, which is so ironic because the Russos haven't touched this character other than in Infinity War.
I know.
Very funny because we're going to go into Cap next, which they have touched
Twice.
twice. Yeah, 2 out of 3 of his movies, and that is why I'm about to start to get heated because I don't understand how you could do 2 out of 3 of a character's trilogy, have them in Infinity War, and then do what they did to his character in Endgame. Now, before before I fully get into this, guys, I know there are people who don't agree with what I'm going to say. All right, I understand. I understand. All right. Quite frankly, I know there's a whole lot of people who will agree with what I'm going to say. And so it's fine. We can all have differences of opinion, especially when it comes to Cap's character arc and how his story ended. Just know neither of us like it, and you're about to hear that. So if you don't have the interest in hearing it, just skip forward to when we talk about Thor.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you teed it up, so we'll just say it. I mean, the ending with Cap is completely out of character. I mean, this is the man who is with Bucky to the end of the line until he sees Peggy Carter and is like, "You know what? Let's do that instead." The only thing that could ever justify what they have chosen to do here is I understand they felt the need to take Steve off the board, and they probably felt like they couldn't kill 2 out of the 3 big 3. So like from a purely logistical story standpoint, I understand why they felt like they had to go and like remove him. However, in so doing, they completely made him the antithesis of who he has been. He has been so consistent throughout. I mean, we talked about Tony's story arc, right? Tony is a character who has experienced an immense amount of change. We see him at his absolute most selfish in Iron Man, and he becomes the man who sacrifices himself to save the universe by the end. That is an immense change. Cap is very different in the sense that yes, he has changed and yes, he has evolved, and we've seen him, learn things about himself beyond just being, I'm Captain America, the soldier. But at the same time, his core values and what he stands for have always been the same. And core to that is being loyal to the people he loves, namely a man named Bucky Barnes. And so to watch this character in his not last appearance, but the appearance before in Civil War, literally go to battle with one of his friends, go against the Avengers. I mean, lose his status as Captain America on behalf of Bucky Barnes, go on the run for all these years, and then say, you know what? Actually, let me just go back in time and hang out with this woman I've kissed once that I've been just weirdly obsessed with because I never like truly grieved that opportunity and like what happened there. So yeah, it's rough. And I agree with where he ended up in the sense that like didn't want him to die, but it was time to give Sam the shield, but like literally anything else. Truly.
I'm going to stretch really quick here. I let T get that prepared and say her piece because we all know where I'm going with this very quickly. And I think y'all might be shocked that I let Taylor talk about Bucky before I did, but don't worry.
I was actually surprised when you like teed it up and then were like giving it to me. I was like, wait, I was going to give you the floor.
I wanted you to breathe because I knew I wasn't going to by the time I was ready to go. I was like, let her say her piece because I'm about to go off. Okay, first let me say the argument against this is always he was finally selfish, and his whole time was that he's never been selfish. Okay, just from a logistical standpoint, how did he know staying in that timeline would not completely F everything up?
He totally didn't because technically it should have.
Well, that's my point. So, quite frankly, from just a logistical standpoint, him deciding to be selfish, hey, maybe that's like leave the Avengers and go do something else with your life, not let's go back in time, stay there with a woman who actually lived a whole life without me, and everything should be fine, hopefully. Like, that doesn't really make sense.
Well, not to mention, and I know you're going to get on a roll, but I do have to say this because I forgot to add it in my section. I talked about how Cap has been very steady the whole time, but the one area that has been an area of immense growth for him is embracing his life as it is now, right? Like we
Yes.
see him when he comes back in Avengers, he
Even
is
in the Winter Soldier.
to acclimate. Yeah. And he's struggling to acclimate, and that has been his source of growth, is learning to accept his life as it is now and build a life for himself that's, I'm sure, way different than the life that he expected to lead. But then he just goes and is like, you want to talk about regression? This man goes and actively chooses to lead the life that he always thought he would lead instead of embracing the growth that he has had and the family that he has made for himself, even outside of Bucky.
Correct. So that is like one level of this, right? That's one level. Then there's two other levels. And the first is if you want to look at it from the Bucky perspective, which I always want to look at it from the Bucky perspective. So this is where I'm going to start. Even during his first movie, when Peggy was a love interest, Bucky was still his number one priority. Like, we have established from the jump that this man risks everything for his best friend.
Yeah.
Second movie comes around, finds out Bucky is the Winter Soldier, literally is prepared to let him beat him to death if he has to, because he will not fight him, because that is his best friend. We go to his third movie, where, as Taylor said, the entire movie is literally because he knows Bucky is innocent and he is defending him. He completely implodes the Avengers. And yes, I understand the Sokovia Accords play a part, but there are two tiers to Civil War. One, the Sokovia Accords start to break everybody up, but Cap's loyalty to Bucky and knowing he's innocent and refusing to let him get taken into custody because he did it for a crime he didn't do is literally the whole second half, including the stuff with Tony.
Yeah.
Mind you, he didn't side with Tony, even though he knew Bucky killed his parents. He created an entire chasm between everybody for one man. Okay? Okay? Then we do just to talk about Endgame alone, because it was like the Russo's brothers were almost directing two different movies. Like at one point they almost remembered Cap's story arc, and then at another moment they were like, "Oh, we really need to get him off the board, don't we?" In the same movie, Bucky's still alive, stops 2012 Captain America from fighting him. He knew those were the words. If he had been like, "You can go back in time to get Peggy," that wouldn't have worked. The words "Bucky's still alive" sits there and stops 2012 Cap from fighting him because he's like, "What?"
Yeah.
In the same breath, while this is not exactly the same, you cannot tell me he went back in time and could sit there knowing his best friend was in the same timeline being tortured. You can't. I'm sorry.
I totally agree. Beyond all of that, right? What was he doing with his life? Like, I don't mean to be like Cap owes everybody everything, but I mean, you want to talk about consistent character. What is I mean, there's a lot of things that are consistent about Cap, but one of the things that we haven't quite touched on yet is his true belief in his responsibility to do something with the enhancements that he has been given, right?
Right.
He feels, I mean, it's so evident in his first movie. He's like a stage, show or whatever for so long, and then it is Bucky as the catalyst, but at the same time you see how frustrated he is by the limited role that he's been given because that man wanted to help. Why did he volunteer as a guy who isn't physically able to even qualify for the
Yes.
military? He has always felt a sense of responsibility. So then for him to live out this life where he is just completely sitting on the sidelines, and obviously that's conjecture because we don't actually know what he did, but I know there's the idea, to your point, of, oh, he was finally selfish, oh, he's finally resting, but like, to me, we had not seen that change in Steve to the point where he was ready for that.
Right. Well, and be selfish and get a wife in present day. Like, and I guess like just what's so aggravating is, again, logistically him going back in general doesn't really pan out to how they explain the rest of the whole time travel thing.
No.
But on top of the fact is everything you just said. How does this character go back in time and sit still?
Yeah.
Because he can't, there's no way he is making changes because somehow he is back. Like, I don't want to get into that. That none of that makes sense to me. I don't want to talk about the time travel aspect. I don't understand it.
No, we spent a whole episode talking about it last week, so catch that one.
I just mean like specifically with Steve, I
No, I
don't
know.
understand it. Like I don't know how that works. But regardless, you can't tell me this man could sit there knowing his best friend was being tortured and what he was going through and was like, "Let me just dance with this lady." Like, she also lived a life. Like, she lived a life without you. You saw her on her deathbed. Like, she moved on.
Yeah.
And so it's like, hello? That whole thing's aggravating. Plus, I'll bring up the marketing like I did in the past. His other half that got dusted was Bucky.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. So then you just left Bucky. Just sayonara, bestie. We can finally hang out and be chill. Neither of us are on the run or being hidden in Wakanda or anything of that nature. But I'm going to go back to this lady I kissed once
I know.
in the 40s. Yeah.
I know.
The whole thing is aggravating. But that's just the Bucky perspective. That's just the Bucky perspective. When I look at it from the Peggy perspective, again, kissed her once in the 40s.
Yeah.
Second movie, she died. Boo-hoo. Oh no. He met her niece and was macking up on her by the next movie.
No, I don't think, did she die in the second movie? I don't think she died till the third.
Oh, he did. He found out in the very beginning of the third.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah.
Regardless, we see him interact with her as she's like
sick.
I believe she has dementia.
Yes, or something presenting
Something
similar
of that.
to,
Yes.
Yeah.
So we see him interact with her. That's the only interaction other than when he's like, well, Peggy built Shield and like all that stuff. But like it's more in awe of like her building Shield and not because he's like, oh my God, Peggy.
Yeah.
And then again, the third movie, she literally dies and then he is up on her knees. Like just I can't really explain that. Like, what do you do now that you ended up going back in time and you're watching this niece grow up? Like, there's a lot of weird thought processes there. It doesn't really make sense. And then what's even funnier to me is Infinity War, we're not worried about Peggy. No mention of Peggy, right? Like, and it's almost, and this is why I mean, like, when you said they had to figure out how to take him off the board, you could tell that was what happened. And it
Yeah.
was not actually like, let's make sure this character's handled properly. It was, unfortunately, we do just have to take him off the board by the end of the movie.
Yeah.
Because, oh, rewatching Endgame, this was the worst part of rewatching Endgame. No. Well, it like
There are
tied
a lot
for
of traumatic events in Endgame.
yeah, but I mean, like, I just mean from just like a storytelling perspective.
I also am just hold on. I just have to say, for those who are not seeing this, which is everyone, because this is an audio only episode, she absolutely just did the Brittany Broski meme like to a T, and it was actually incredible. You could literally like imagine Brittany. That is exactly what just happened on my screen. It was beautiful. Carry on. I just needed to give everyone that visual because I enjoyed it immensely.
I had to rethink my statement. But I think what hurt the most was watching them have to sprinkle in Peggy randomly to justify the
In the
ending.
stupid picture thing.
Even at the beginning, he's leading the therapy sessions, and instead of talking about the snap and like what he lost and all that, he's like, when I went into the ice in 40, and he's like, he brings her up there. And then the dumb picture. I'm like, Bucky's not here. Sam is not here. The people who you currently care about essentially died 5 years ago. You don't know that you can bring them back until this exact moment. So, my guy, why are we mourning this lady who, one, is literally dead? Like, she died in the timeline. And two, you kissed her once. It was one kiss. And for all I know, it was an adrenaline kiss. You went and put yourself in the ice 10 minutes later. Like, it wasn't that deep. And I just like, I think it's so aggravating to me. Like, I'm not gonna lie, the music at the end of Endgame doesn't trigger me because it was the end of Endgame. It triggers me because all I think about is that dumb scene of them dancing at the end. I turned it off. When we rewatched it, I skipped right past it so I could watch the ends, like their signature part and all that. I literally was like, I'm not watching this. As soon as I saw the house, I turned. I was like, I'm not watching this. This is the beauty of watching movies at home nowadays. I don't need to sit through things I don't want to see, and I don't want to see this BS on my screen.
Yeah. I mean, look, this is probably one of the most this and what we're about to talk about next with Thor are two of the most like hotly contested choices in all of Endgame.
They are. And the thing I'm going to say, though, is at least whether we like Love and Thunder or not, the answer is we don't. At least Thor comes back to be able to redeem himself.
Yeah.
But because this was the end for Steve, it was just a really big slap in the face to all Captain America fans, in my opinion.
I don't disagree. And then, we're potentially there's all those rumors about how Loki is potentially going to be coming in and visiting that, I guess, our Steve, technically, in this new universe that he's created. If we're following the rules that they don't actually follow themselves, so we might get this Steve again, which. Look, if they find a way, here's all I'm going to say. If they find a way to, through Doomsday, maybe Secret Wars, to rectify this trash decision, honestly, mood. Like, I don't think he should come back and be Captain America. That is fully owned by Sam. He's the guy. He is the number one on the call sheet, 100%. But if we could just, find a way to, undo this particular decision for Steve and give him a better ending and a better send off. Like, we just got done talking about how perfect Tony's was. It's like they put every ounce of writing effort into making sure that Tony had a good ending, and then they were like, oh, dang, Cap, though. What do we do with this guy?
No, it really was. And I think the reason that I'm also just so upset is what I initially started this conversation with was these directors shot 2 out of 3 of his trilogy movies.
Yeah.
He could have at any point, or I should say, they could have at any point sprinkled in Peggy if they wanted this to be his ending. They could have actually had this be a more meaningful thing. But instead, it was always about Bucky.
Yeah.
Literally always about Bucky, which, yeah, of course it should be. But like, you can't make his entire movie arc about Bucky and then just randomly decide to be like, he's going to leave his best friend behind for some lady he kissed once in the 40s. And his best friend's really traumatized and messed up from the years of torture he went through. But I guess he's fine now because he dropped him off in Wakanda. And I mean, he did just get back from being snapped for 5 years, but he should be good. Sam's here. He'll babysit him. Like, I literally was like, dude, talk about just being a crappy friend. Because what the heck?
Yeah, he truly just like pieced out on the situation and was like, bye bye. Like, our, I think we've talked about this before, but like we had these like Barbie walkie talkies growing up that like they
Bye
had
bye.
like,
See you later.
yeah, they had like different buttons with different phrases, like beyond just the walkie talkie. And all I could think about was just bye bye, see you later.
It's that. And, hi, it's Barbie. And I don't know why she had a country accent, but she did.
No idea.
No,
Amazing.
that is literally how he was like, bye bye, see you later. And was out, like, did not care. Did not care.
Truly.
Oh, no, Steve's really bothers me. And again, I think beyond the glaringly obvious issues with it, it makes me sad because these directors, again, I'll say it so many times until I'm kicking this into a literal like dirt pile. I don't care. You touched this character throughout almost everything. And then you were like, ugh, crap. Like, at least with Thor, while I don't agree with how it was all handled between Infinity War and Endgame with the Russos across the board, you spent no time on his trilogy. You had nothing. You had like you while undoing a lot, didn't really have to justify anything because you didn't touch his character before. I just don't understand how you spend so much time with the character and then get them so grossly incorrect.
Well, it's kind of crazy because like we just talked about how Cap was the afterthought, and it's like, how do you make the character that you actually got your MCU debut with?
And to this day has your first movie in this top 5 of the best MCU movies on almost every fan's list.
Not to mention, like, between Winter Soldier and Civil War, Civil War is also very highly graded. Like, people quite
I'd say
enjoy
that's probably a
that
top
film.
10.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Between those two films, what do they think got them the opportunity to do Infinity War and Endgame? Like, maybe it's all the work they did with Cap, and then they were like, actually, this guy that got us our ticket to do some of the biggest movies in movie history, we're just gonna like forget about him and like just like really not write him well at all.
No.
How do you traitors to Steve as Cap?
Yeah, it was very upsetting. And to this day, it's very upsetting. Again, if you couldn't keep him around, there were other ways to do it. Let the guy just retire, have a happy ending in his timeline.
Please.
Moving on, call up Sharon again. I don't know. Like, go meet somebody. Regardless, like, the fact that you did that just is so upsetting to me. But honest to God, and it's so hard. They're like such a toss up depending on the day. Somehow Thor's is more upsetting.
This is where, like, all right. Like, if you're gonna scream into the mic about Cap, I'm going to scream into the mic about Thor, because there are so many things that are wrong with Thor. And I know you're really aggravated about the inconsistencies, specifically around Ragnarok and Infinity War, so I will let you get there.
Yeah.
But the thing with Thor, and I know we touched on this last episode, that really just POs me to no end, is they took what could have been an extremely meaningful conversation, valuable, deep conversation about mental health, guilt, trauma, self expectation, perfectionism, you name it. They could have had a beautiful conversation about that through Thor, everything he's been through, everything that he's lost, the expectations he holds for himself. And instead, they were like, let's make a bunch of fat jokes and make him the butt of every single joke in this film. And it is just like so intensely frustrating to me. Like last episode we talked about the one smart conversation he has in the entire film, which is the one with his mom about the expectations he's had for himself and all of the things that he's been through. And yet it is diminished by the way that they chose to present the character, because it is everything that he does then is represented as a joke because they have made him a walking joke essentially. Not to mention then you get into all of the conversations around fat phobia and all of that, which is all important to think about. But the fact that they chose to present him in that way and represent him in that way, not only is it fat phobic, but it also diminishes any conversation that he's about to have or can represent from a mental health perspective, which could have been truly like so meaningful to so many people. And they completely missed the opportunity. And that to me is one of the most egregious things that they chose to do in all of Endgame.
I agree. And the thing is I don't necessarily disagree with how he looks. Because I think when you are dealing with mental health issues of any kind, I mean, somebody who just as much does, the last thing you're worried about at any given time is how you look and keeping up with your physical health, your hygiene, all that stuff. You're not worried about that because your mental health is severely struggling. So for me, it has nothing to do with the quote unquote fat Thor, but yeah, that alone, hello, that's maybe not what we should be calling him. Hello.
Yeah, just a thought, maybe a little bit more, respectful.
Yeah, he's just Thor. We don't really need to talk about, yeah, but anyway, it to me has nothing to do with the appearance or things of that nature because I do truly think that is from a literal physical, like a movie telling looking at it standpoint, pretty good way to kind of show how severe he's gone and swung to the other side because of what he's lost and then losing to Thanos and not being able to bring anybody back. I mean, we have to remember while he has his entire family on the, dead list, it's not just that. The final thing for him was the fact that he didn't stop Thanos from snapping his fingers and causing half of the universe to disappear. So that is literally the final nail in the coffin for him. And so I'm not really too bothered by the literal physical portrayal of him. But you hit the nail on the head when saying it's about how he was made out to be. And it is the fact that he was made out to be stupid.
Yeah.
He really was. He was made out to be stupid. And it was really upsetting because we even see that when he's talking about the ether. And I'm like, this man is so respected. Like, we have to think about when we first watched The Dark World. Now, do we all watch it often? No. But when we are first watching that movie, him just talking to Jane about Asgard and the ether and the world and the things he knows, he is knowledgeable. This
Mhm.
man was supposed to be the king of Asgard. Like, he grew up training for that role, preparing for that role. So to make him seem like an idiot is heartbreaking to me.
I
And I
agree.
don't think enough of the characters also acknowledge that. Instead, they're in with the joke rather than realizing, like, you guys have known him since 2012. Maybe he doesn't hang out at Avengers campus like the rest of y'all because he's a god who literally has other things to do. But like, you guys know who he actually is supposed to be.
Mhm.
These are the main 5 friends he has ever made. Obviously, then you have a couple others, but I'm talking about the OG 6.
Yeah.
And you guys are in on the jokes rather than sitting there and acknowledging the severity of the things he's going through and the depression he is in and the mental health issues all across the board he is having. And instead, you're laughing at him.
Yeah. Well, and it's that, and like I love what you were saying about, the physical representing the mental challenges that he's facing. I think that's such a spot on insight there, but I think, taking that one step further, it's the fact that then that is made to be a joke instead of, "Oh, hey, I recognize that this is not what you typically look like. Like, what is going on?"
Yeah.
They make so many jokes about how much he's drinking. Like, that is so clearly a coping mechanism. And as his friends, the fact that you are not saying at any point other than when you need him to be sober, to be functional, to do something for you, at no point are you talking to him about slowing down the drinking and getting help and doing those things. No, no, no. It's just, hey, you might want to stop. We're about to do the time heist.
Well, and let's also remember he's Asgardian. This man has to drink a lot
Yeah.
to be intoxicated. We see him at the beginning of Ragnarok when Doctor Strange gives him a beer and he downs that thing in 5 seconds. He's fine.
Yeah.
And it's a big beer. He could go for 7 more of those. Like,
Yeah.
he has a different tolerance. So the fact that he is intoxicated and nobody is real, like, come on. Come on. Like, I think it's so poorly shown how people handle other people with mental health. And I also think, just from a movie telling perspective, like, it's upsetting across the board. And then
Yeah.
when you do have movies like the Thunderbolts that just came out, and now let's not get this confused. This movie came out 6 years after.
Yeah.
Let's not get it confused. But let's not forget we were talking about Tony with having an anxiety disorder very early on in at the MCU. We've addressed some of this. We've talked a little bit about, and not like in depth, but it's been slightly addressed, the PTSD.
Mm-hmm.
And not just in Tony, I should say, but like across the board.
Yeah.
We see it a little bit in Natasha, we see it a little bit in Cap, you know, all these guys come from things that have caused other issues.
Yeah.
Makes sense. They all have relatively traumatic things either happen to them while we like actively see them on the screen, and or in like Natasha's case, happened to her growing up. And then we obviously get that backstory a little bit more after this. But regardless, we've handled mental health before this movie.
Yeah.
So I'm not quite sure why, when it came to Thor, like, the movie had plenty of moments to be funny.
Yeah.
You had Ant-Man running around. Like, Scott was running around being hilarious the entire movie. We didn't really need Thor to be the butt of the jokes. And I actually kind of felt like, out of all the characters, Hulk was the only one who really understood, because you could tell that they were the closest.
Yeah.
And he was the only one. I don't want to use the words babying him because that feels really wrong, but like, he was taking that step back and treating it as a mental illness.
With like a gentle sense.
Yes.
Like, he wasn't like, Tony was like actively goading him the entire time.
Yeah.
Because Tony has the mental maturity of a 12-year-old. Yes, we got a barb in on Tony. Heck yeah. But at the same time, then you're right. You have Hulk, who is maybe not actively helping, but he's also at the same time like trying to be understanding, and he's being gentle. And I think, you name some of the PTSD and some of the mental health issues that we've talked about in the past, but let's not forget, like, Bruce openly admits to trying to commit suicide.
Yeah.
So if anybody is going to understand what that level of depression feels like, or an extreme mental health challenge looks like, it's going to be Bruce. So it does make the most sense for him to be the most understanding. It just sucks to see that everybody else, who is also like, not, to your point, not a single one of them isn't touched by some sort of mental health challenge at any point in their lives. I mean, no human has gone completely scot free from having a challenge with their mental health at any given time. But to see the rest of them then act the way that they do is so frustrating, and that only one of them even shows an iota of empathy and understanding and willingness to actually help, instead of just, what is Tony trying to do? Shock him out of his, depression, or make him laugh out of his depression by making him the butt of the joke? Like, it's not going to work. It's just a juvenile way to approach it, and it is sad. And he deserves better as a person and as a character.
He does. And I think what also makes me struggle is it was all entirely a plot device.
Yeah.
And ironically, I can actually say that more knowing he bounces right back for Love and Thunder.
Yeah.
Like, we completely go back to normal. And if you took Infinity War and Endgame out and you went from Ragnarok to Guardians of the Galaxy, you might be a little confused based off why he's with them and not on the ship with the Asgardians. But that is a 1-for-1.
Well, wouldn't it be Love and Thunder?
Oh, I'm sorry, but I meant with the Guardians.
Yeah.
But like, that is a 1-for-1. Now, obviously, we know we had Taika come back, didn't necessarily hit it out of the park, but you could see at least like the character is in the same realm. So to think that that is a what 6 7 year, maybe 8, we don't actually have full timing on Guardians, or I'm sorry, on Love and Thunder. That has me all thrown off. But because we did also get Guardians 3, but
Yeah.
we don't have exact timing, but think that's 6 to 8 years post Ragnarok. And if you took out those middle two movies, nothing changed. That's how, to me, I'm like, this was a mega plot device that wasn't even done right. And that's what sucks.
Yeah, it's a multi-level problem, and this leads right into your soapbox, so I'll let you get there, but I want to make this point first. You know, you could have had Thor dealing with the ramifications, the mental health issues, all of that, and done it in a much more serious manner, in a way that treats that type of issue with the level of care and respect that it deserves, and followed that a little bit into Love and Thunder, where you still see that he's recovering, right? It didn't need to go as slap happy as it did, and it absolutely was insane. Like, that movie is just, oh my god. Anyway, I won't even like talk about that because I truly can't. But it's the problem where they have these different directors treating the character so differently,
Yeah.
and that's the perfect tee up for your qualm with Thor. So Katie, take it away.
Oh, I've never had. This is funny because this was the other one that I was like, I can't tell which qualm I have bigger. Okay, we're gonna have to talk about Infinity War for this part, but it is what obviously feeds into why he is the way he is in Endgame. And we also have to talk about Ragnarok. But the reason we sidelined this was because we all knew this was a bigger conversation. So we were like, we cannot talk about this when we actually cover Infinity War and Endgame. Like, this has to be its own thing. And actually, I think Thor was single handedly the only reason we were going to do the extra episode. And then we were like, well, I guess we'll just talk about Steve and Tony too.
We might as well add in the other two, though. Thor's the real problem child.
Yeah, but we were like, we know we're going to want to spend most of this on Thor. And this should have been my first inkling that something was going to go wrong with the Russos handling some of these characters. And now, again, you kind of said it. When it bounces from one director to another, I mean, I don't know if there's a single character that's been completely unscathed from that just chaos of that happening,
Yeah.
including especially when they do team ups. Like, I feel like the team ups really screw them over a lot. So I don't think as fans, any of us are dumb enough to think that like a character wouldn't have something, not handled necessarily the best, or something's forgotten, whatever. But let's just start with the baseline of knowing that in every trilogy we've always talked about, the third movie, the hero loses something. We talk about it. I mean, my God, even with Spider-Man, I thought nobody could lose more than Thor, and then like arguably
Peter was like, how's my whole identity?
yeah,
I raised
Peter
you
doesn't
one.
exist, So like I mean, whatever. But everybody loses something. I mean, even Ant-Man, I've only watched it once, but he lost something. I don't remember what it was, but I know he lost it.
His sunny outlook on the world.
Yeah. No, I don't actually know. But regardless, he lost something, and yeah. But everybody loses something. Cap's shield, Tony lost the suits in his third one. From a base level, Thor lost Mjolnir at the very beginning of Ragnarok. Like, very beginning. But then Taika was like, nah, we're not done. And literally was like, Asgard blows up. He loses his eye. Like, his hair gets cut. Like, essentially, and we do laugh because when we think about Ragnarok, this man loses everything.
Truly.
But, down to his hair and eyeball. But like, I mean, it's true. But that's the point. That's Taika's point. He's reforming him. He's making him into the leader, because we also know he sits on the throne as the king of Asgard at the end. Now, not literally on the throne because Asgard blew up, but
that's the other piece. He groomed him for the throne for Thor to give it away.
Honey. We're getting there. We are getting there.
I'm going to jump in when we get there, because that is like, if the mental health piece is number one, that is number two for me.
We are getting there. So that's just a general list of things he's lost. I mean, I think if we wanted to be a little more specific, there are probably 3 more things to add to the list. But we're just going to say the big ones right there, the big 4 or 5. The Russos spent the entirety of Infinity War undoing every single one of those.
Yep.
And then by Endgame, managed to perfect it. down to the hair. Like, I know it's stupid, but this was all supposed to be, oh, and the throne was all supposed to be symbolic of Thor finally being ready for the throne and
Yep.
being ready to be a leader and leaving behind the things that made him not ready, right? That was the hair. I know it's stupid, but hair is symbolic. It holds memories.
Mhm.
His hair was cut. He lost the weapon he was given and earned to be worthy in his first movie. He lost that. He lost his eye and ended up looking just like his father by the hands of his long lost sister. And then he lost Asgard and he learned the valuable lesson that Asgard is not the place, it's the people. Hello, these are the words spoken. And this is gospel here, right? Like, and then they literally spend half of Infinity War with Thor determined to get a weapon, even though we just saw this man doesn't need a weapon to get his power to work anymore. And in order to direct it, that was the whole point at the beginning, right? He needed a way to direct his power. He couldn't fully control it the same way. No, the entirety of Ragnarok showed us that he was now strong enough to wield the power of thunder, even though it's technically lightning, and be able to defeat his enemies without a weapon needed. He doesn't need it anymore. They spent all of Infinity War undoing that by
Yes.
giving him Stormbreaker. Why? We didn't need it. Not to mention, he missed anyway with Thanos. Why didn't you just blast him with lightning? Why didn't we just blast the gauntlet? Hey, we could have done that if you would have just stayed true to what he actually just proved he could do. Then, of course, they gave him an eye. Hello, just give him the eye patch. Why did we need to bring the eye back? That
I
was
don't know.
symbolic of his father. Like, I don't understand why we did that. And then, of course, then we move into the whole New Asgard is there, but it's not the same. He gives up the throne completely in Endgame, and then they grow his hair back, and that regresses him completely. Everything is undone by these two movies that happened in Ragnarok to show him growing. And that is why, you know what? No, I'm going to come to the correct conclusion. That is why Love and Thunder sucked, because of what the Russos did to his character in Infinity War and Endgame. Because you know what? I'm sure Taika could have pulled something better off of his butt in Love and Thunder had his character not been low-key assassinated and then remade in the two movies prior.
Fair point. I like what you're saying because I mean, I don't know how you make hogwash that is Love and Thunder and then also make Ragnarok.
No, and my biggest point is regardless of everything else, Taika put him on the throne at the end of his movie. Which means if there was a fourth movie, if we took Infinity War and Endgame out of the equation, Thor would have been the king.
Yes.
And that is how that story would have been told.
Well, and not to mention, like, I have this, like, I've only seen Love and Thunder once, but I have this, like, visceral memory of that initial few scenes where he's still with the Guardians and he's fighting on that planet and he is, like, actively, like, being a bozo and actively putting people in danger.
It's Thor 1
Yeah.
all over again.
Through his idiotic actions. So he is, because you're right, because of what happened in Infinity War and Endgame, he has completely regressed to this absolutely like self-centered version of himself that does not care about the people around him at all, which
Yeah.
is the antithesis of the version that Taika had left the character with when he finished Ragnarok. And it is just so frustrating to me.
Exactly. And I truly, now that I've said all of that out loud, I truly sit there and I believe that is why Love and Thunder is as bad as it is. Because what was Taika supposed to do? Now, there are other issues. Obviously, there's too much comedy and things of that nature. But what was he supposed to do?
I actually there's a part of me now that we're like on this like let's actually defend Taika train. There is a which is like a wild shift for us. You've opened a new epiphany for this like everybody on this show.
I know. Well, as I was talking, I was like, hold on a second. Because truly, what is he supposed to do? Pretend like he could go back to the character growth he gave this character? Like, you can't. They just undid it.
I do wonder if like there is a portion of Taika that made Love and Thunder like self-sabotage that was like basically like you want to blow up everything I wrote for this character, fine, we're going to make him an idiot. Like you want to make him an idiot, fine, I will raise you and he's going to be an idiot this whole movie.
No, that's so fair because Ragnarok Thor and Infinity War Thor are like one version,
Yeah.
and then Endgame and Love and Thunder are a completely other version.
And he's so funny in Ragnarok, but you still get a level of like, I am still an intelligent and empathetic and like he is able to comport himself in like social situations. Like he is able to do that and understand levels of seriousness and when he has to be serious and all of that stuff. He's still able to do that and still be funny.
Yeah.
Like you don't have to completely make him the level of serious he was in the first two Thor films. That's fine. But then, and to your point, like he tonally kind of matches that in Infinity War, and then they just compound that in the wrong way when they go into Endgame. And then Taika was like, "You want to mess with my guy? Fine, let's just completely ride this ship."
And honest to God, maybe that's not true, but I'm down that conspiracy theory route at this point. That Taika just was like, you want to screw over this character I just made? Again, another director who has a movie that is arguably in every fan's top 5, if not every fan's at least top 10, but yeah, well, anybody I ever talked to, it's in their top 5.
Or top three, let's
Yeah,
be honest.
honest to God, it's in my top 3.
Yeah.
And you want to sit there then and undo that. Like, I would be the same way. I'd sit there and just be petty about it and be like, no, you made my character an idiot. So I'll just continue to make him an idiot because this is how he was in Endgame.
You want to make him a joke? I will also make him a joke because you have completely reduced the importance of this character by doing this, and he is now like a completely different version than what he was. Truly, that is my new headcanon, and that is what I'm choosing to believe in what happened with Love and Thunder.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Because I accidentally stumbled on that point, but I agree. I fully, now that I'm looking at the trajectory of where we went, I fully think that that is such a valid point of why Love and Thunder was so bad because you can't, again, you can't undo what happened in those past 2 movies. You can't. The Russo brothers completely, well, I guess theoretically you could
Yeah.
because the Russo brothers did it to Ragnarok. Like they, between the Infinity War and Endgame, completely decimated any of the progress Thor made in becoming who he is supposed to be and becoming the leader he is supposed to be. But what are you supposed to do? Magically have him lose Stormbreaker and then cut his hair again and then take the eyeball out and somehow decide to lead even though he just decided not to let, like, he wanted Valkyrie to lead. Like, you can't to a degree undo all of that again.
Yeah, because then it just becomes like even worse whiplash.
Yeah.
And it's interesting the way that like the studio wants consistency in certain things and other things is just like, yeah, you want to blow up this character's arc? Absolutely go for it. Like, where were the people who, look, you know how we feel about Kevin on this show, but I will say, Kevin, like, where were you? Like, it is your job as the head guy to make sure that we are telling a cohesive story, not just are we getting from point A to point B, but for a character on an individual level, it should not be like one person, one movie, and another person, another movie. There's going to be some variation with different directors, different writers, sure, but they
Mm-hmm.
should not be completely different versions of the character.
Well, and let me go even deeper on my thoughts here. I'll bet you that's half the reason we had as little of the connections we had in phases 4 and 5. Because I don't think this studio, and I love Marvel, and guys, we obviously have this Marvel podcast. We talk about it every freaking week. But you can't love something without being able to be critical of it at times.
Yeah.
That's just a fact. Otherwise, you're just blindly following. I love Marvel, but I fully believe because they are unable to figure out how to do not just from one movie to the next portrayals, especially if directors change, but especially team ups.
Yeah.
And then having these characters come back from team ups and either follow through with something that just happened or don't follow through. Like, it's just so inconsistent. I truly think that's a big reason we didn't get a lot of team ups and starting of, you know, this person's in this and this person's in this in phases 4 and 5 because I truly think they didn't want to accidentally do it to other characters. I think they were like leaving them completely disconnected allows us to not have this happen.
Yeah. I mean, you're right because they basically overcorrected.
Mm-hmm.
They were like, oh, shoot, we have a consistency problem across projects. Great. Nobody's ever going to talk to anybody else. Fine. Everything's consistent then.
Right. And that's why, too, I'm going to say this for the future. This is my message to Marvel for the future. Do not touch the X-Men if you are not going to be able to do this.
I agree. Times a million. Times a million.
It was one thing, in my opinion, the way this was handled in phases 1 through 3. It's your first go at the rodeo. whatever. Things are a little all over the place. I mean, Love and Thunder, in some comparison, pales nothing to some of the worst of phases 1 through 3. I know we all want to glorify the first 3 phases, but let's be real.
There were some stinkers.
There were some real bad ones. Regardless, fine. Phases 4 through 6, I mean, these were a dumpster fire for a lot of reasons. And I'm not talking about the content itself necessarily. I'm just talking about everything.
Yeah.
Like dumpster fire, zero plans, just like,
Showing their seams, man.
well, I mean, obviously nobody expected to lose Kang the way we did. Like there were extenuating circumstances to some degree, but like whatever. Okay, fine. For the love of God, do not touch the X-Men if you cannot figure out how to go from one property to the next, including team-ups, and be able to tell a cohesive story with characters, because that is going to be a franchise that is going to be so glaringly obvious because these characters are more involved with each other than just teaming up every once in a while. They literally are, most of them, living in X Mansion. If you want to be correct about how you're handling this, that's the best way to probably go about it. And so you're not going to be able to tell a Gambit story and then just pretend it didn't happen and go and have him be in the next X-Men. You're not going to be able to go do a Wolverine one and then have him pretend he's not been in a previous movie with Jean Grey all of a sudden. Like it just, this stuff doesn't work. And now, while I'm not going to give the flowers necessarily to the previous X-Men movies, at least they remembered the previous movies all happened. So we can't just not do that. And that's the end of my soapboxes. Moving forward, do not allow this to continue to be how things play out, because Thor is the pinnacle of being horribly handled his entire time in the MCU.
Yeah, and he's actually a really cool character, so it's like really annoying.
I mean, honestly, kudos to Chris Hemsworth for even wanting to stick around, because if my character was being continuously handled like dog crap, I would not. I mean, post Endgame, I wouldn't have wanted to come back for the next Thor. And then after that dog crap, I would not have wanted to come back for the next thing. And yet he is. So I really give him kudos for even wanting to return. But truly, do not start an X-Men era until you figure out how this is going to look.
I totally agree. I mean, you've already pissed off Lizzie, so like let's not continue to do that.
Oh yeah. Well, she's one who, and not that I don't think Chris Hemsworth has self-respect, but she's one who sat there and said, "No, until you fix my character, I refuse to be in another one of your movies."
Yeah, I mean, good for her.
Yeah.
Well, that has been probably our spiciest episode ever, I think.
I've been waiting for this episode for so long.
I was going to say, like, when we started this replay series, like, we have always known that this was going to be an interesting episode. I'm pretty sure if you, like, listen to our first, because we went timeline order. So the first thing that we did was the first Avenger. I low key think, and I would have to go listen back, but I kind of think that we mentioned that this was going to be a spicy one when we finally get to Endgame. And lo and behold, 3.5 years later, we finally did it. And I hope the spice level has matched what you were expecting, because honestly, I genuinely enjoyed being able to call out some of these issues, because we have been feeling these feelings for 6 years. All that being said, we are going to wrap on our replay series for now. There are still a few things that we will cover in the future that do predate the show but are more recent.
I think that's just WandaVision and the Falcon and Winter Soldier, guys, just so you know.
Also, Far From Home, technically.
I forget that movie came out.
I know, because it was so weird, like weirdly placed. But anyway, so those are all things that we will continue to cover in the future. But for now, we are going to be wrapping with our replay series for the time being, because we just wrapped the end of the Infinity Saga, though I guess technically somewhere Far From Home fits in there. I'm still unclear. Anyway, if you have been enjoying this series and are excited for us to start to get into more new content as that comes out, please make sure that you're following on your podcast platform of choice. And below are some resources like our website and our Buy Me a Coffee. If you are interested in checking those out, make sure that you head over to the show notes.
Make sure you guys also follow us on our socials, which are down the show notes as well. And we are moving into Marvel Zombies, which I am very excited about. I cannot wait. So make sure you guys are getting ready to watch that as well because it's going to drop. I think it's all dropping at once.
Yes.
It's a 4-part series. So make sure you guys watch it when it does come out because, again, it looks awesome. It's a continuation of a What If episode in the first season. I don't have the exact episode, but it is a continuation of that one. So if you want to maybe go back and watch that before watching it, I do recommend that. But otherwise, again, just go watch it. We will be covering that, and I'm very excited. I hope you guys are too. And on that note, Marvel just blew your mind, so let's talk about it.